it's so helpful to understand that our surface level behaviors and reactions are stemming from something underneath that. So, for instance, if a wife is angry, or there's accusations, or there's like lashing out and blame, those are coming from hurt. It's like a fight or flight response. When somebody's scared or hurt, we will react in ways that we otherwise wouldn't if we weren't feeling unsafe. And so for many women, it's the fight side of things. Their hurt comes out in the fight to be seen, fighting for safety, fighting for connection. One of the ways I like to put this is we can't take away her sadness. Rather, we just want to enter the sadness with her by validating and acknowledging her experience, not trying to defend it or explain it, but just empathize with the fact that this is really, really painful for her. And she feels really hurt and many times feels like she's not enough.
Welcome back to the Unhooked podcast. Today, I'm joined once again by Sam Tielemans, a licensed marriage and family therapist who has spent the past 15 years helping men break free from porn and rebuild emotional intimacy in their relationships. This is actually Sam's second time on the show. His first episode was so good, and so many of you reached out saying how much it resonated that I knew I had to bring him back on. This time, we're going much deeper into the topic of healing relationships. In this episode, you'll learn about how to create emotional safety and rebuild trust after betrayal or secrecy, practical ways men can validate their partner's pain without getting defensive, what couples can do to turn their relationships into a resource, not an obstacle in recovery, and much more. Before we dive in, a quick reminder, if you're looking for support on this journey, my program, Unhooked Academy, is designed to help you break free from porn without shame and build the skills for long-term recovery. You can check it out at unhookedacademy.com. And if you want more direct, personalized support, I currently do have a few spots open for one-on-one coaching. Those spots are limited, so if you're interested, head to jeremylipkowitz.com/intro to learn more. And now, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Sam Tielemans. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Unhooked podcast. Today, we have part 2 of a very special series, bringing back on Sam Tielemans. Sam, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm really excited to have a chance to come back for a second time. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're in rarefied air now of being, one of the few guests that comes back on a second time. But it's just a sign that I really kind of valued the first episode. And, I was re-listening to the episode myself, and I really feel like that is such a powerful episode. So for anyone who hasn't listened to that first episode, I highly recommend going and checking out that first episode we did together, because a lot of what we're going to talk about today builds on top of that. But I've also, I want to say that, many of my listeners have reached out and said that that was just a really great episode. So first of all, I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom.
Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure. I appreciate you having me again.
Yeah. So in the first conversation, we did talk a lot more about the personal side of healing from porn addiction. What do we do for ourselves if we're stuck in that addiction? This time, I really wanted to focus more on the relationship side. So for people who are, in a relationship, who have a partner, how do we navigate some of the complexities of dealing with porn addiction, recovering from that, maybe recovering from betrayal if that happened? So my question for you, first of all, is why is it important to address healing as a couple, not just as an individual?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think so often in the more traditional ways of approaching this issue, so often people are told like he does his work, she does her work, and then at some future undefined period of time, we will come back together. And of course, I think there's value in doing individual work. I feel like the relationship, though, is such a resource for both people to get through really difficult times. And so to not do any type of couples work or whether it's formal or informal, to not address any of the relationship hurts and heal in that context, people just miss out on such an opportunity to feel better faster. And so I literally started my podcast for this reason here, because I just kept seeing couples or individuals saying, we're not ready for couples work yet. We need to keep working on ourselves. And I just wanted to find a way to communicate to them that, yes, doing individual work is great. And there's a way to help you and your partner not only repair, but to use the relationship as a resource for your personal strength, for your personal healing. So there's just so many good things that can be done at each phase of the process that I think unintentionally people delay, and they miss out on chances to feel better faster.
Mm. I've never thought of it that way, and I like the way you put it, that it's being in relationship and doing healing together is actually a resource for you. Because I think a lot of the, kind of maybe people's first pass is like, oh, this is another obstacle. If I'm just, single by myself, this is easier. But if I'm in a relationship, oh, that presents more challenges. But really reframing it not as an obstacle or a burden to your healing, but as a resource to your healing.
And I think a lot of people have heard that quote that the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. Don't know if you've heard of that. There's an author named Johan Hari who talks about that. And a lot of times people will, I think having a community is so helpful, a men's group, a women's group. So they think, okay, that's my source of connection. Then again, like I said, so often they exclude the relationship where that's another it's a pivotal source of connection, because the reality is you're living with, well, if you're married, the people that I work with mostly are married. If you're married, you're living with your spouse. So to not learn how to communicate more effectively, to not learn how to create safety, it's not like you're not seeing each other. So to take some time to learn those skills while you're growing, I think really does go such a long way for both people.
Yeah, I think it also echoes a sentiment I've heard in many different circles, but this idea that the best tool for personal development is your family and your relationships. And like,
Sure.
I remember this one meditation teacher who was a lay meditation teacher, so not a monastic, not like a monk living in a monastery, but he had a family and a job, and he said that his family was his temple. It's like that's
Mm.
the place he goes to learn and to practice, and it can really be a great teacher for us, our relationships.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a great way to put that. I think it goes right along with this idea that we grow so much in relationships. And so there's so many, just I think a lot of times people just don't know what to do. They
Mm,
don't know how to communicate. They don't want to trigger their spouse, so they don't want to make it worse. So it's like, okay, she needs more healing. I'll be working on me. There's just, yeah, really good tools that people can apply even
yeah.
early on in the process.
And that's definitely what I want to get into today, later on in the episode. How can people approach healing together? How to do it without triggering, the other person. I guess to talk first, though, you mentioned that yes, it's beneficial to do your own healing, but some people delay that relational part too long. How do you know when you should still be doing just your own healing versus when you're ready to actually come together? Or maybe they're not even mutually exclusive. Is it always a good time to do relational healing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've probably done, I don't know, 15,000 sessions with people now at this point. And I've found that the people who move through the process faster are work are working on the relationship as quickly as they can if the goal is to stay together. Sometimes people don't know, and a wife might say, I don't want to engage because I don't know what direction I want to go. So of course in that case there's no pressure, but if she says, I really want to repair, I want to have trust in my relationship, I want to feel safe, I just don't. As soon as she's willing, then I say yes, like doing that work immediately can be so helpful. And again, it's not in lieu of him doing his work or her doing her personal work. I think you can do it all in tandem, because if the goal is strong relationship, strong self, those complement each other.
Mm. I guess this is a pretty specific and random question, but brings me back to something that a client has been working on. And if what's going on in the relationship isn't betrayal, if it's not like there's broken trust and it's more just that the partner's porn use has led to a lack of intimacy with their partner. Is that something where, that the partner should work on overcoming the addiction first so that then they can work on the intimacy? Or, are they ready to dive into intimacy while he's still recovering from porn addiction? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the cases where that's true, it's very rare that it doesn't affect the spouse, at least as far as the people that I work with. Maybe it's different for people coming to call you or other people, but it's almost always there's almost always like hurt around this
Mm,
because there's secrecy, deception, his attention going somewhere else. Like so often, 99% of the time, it causes that hurt for her. So for the smaller percent, at least again, as far as I see it in my practice, I do think doing both can be helpful because if there's a breakdown in intimacy, him understanding what his triggers are, him understanding why he goes to the porn in the first place. So much of what we talked about last time we met, he can be doing all of that stuff while building intimacy with her, while building a connection. That's again where I just think it's very uncommon for her not to feel hurt.
mhm.
And with the hurt that she likely will or does feel, he can be doing really good repair work while he's working on himself.
Yeah. Uh, Yeah, I think that's an important distinction. That even if there's not betrayal with a capital B, the kind of this big moment, like there still can be a lot of hurt feelings or, emotional things to work on in the relationship. What would you say are the common misconceptions that couples have about what healing together really looks like?
I think a lot of times when people have reservations about doing kind of couples work, so often a wife I'll just refer to husband and wife
Yeah, for
instead of every
simplicity.
single time, like, yeah, for simplicity's sake, right? So
Yeah.
if you're not married, that's okay. Everything still applies, but just for simplicity. So often a wife has a reservation around doing couples work because she doesn't wanna keep getting hurt, and I totally understand that. So if she were in her mind, couples work means she has to fully reinvest into the relationship. She has to be vulnerable all over again. She has to bring her wall down. When in my mind, that's not the vision that I have for couples work when I do work with couples in the early phases of this, where I don't tell her like, all right, you just have to decide to trust and you have to just move forward and bring your wall down. And if he's trying, you need to try and match that. It's not that at all. I think sometimes people have that image of I'm going to keep getting hurt and I don't want to keep doing that. I think in the early stages of doing couples work, so much of it is geared towards building safety for her. Because if she doesn't have any level of safety and no security in the relationship, then there's no like that's the doorway. And if you can't cross that threshold, nothing else after that will happen. So a part of what I like to do is help a husband learn how to create safety for her and build that into the marriage while we're sitting in the same room together. Help him to know what kinds of conversations to have, how to support her when she's triggered, what to say and do when there's no trust. If we can build that into the relationship early on while she has her wall up, it's okay that that's there. I mean, it's there for a reason. She's been hurt, she's been lied to, so she can't trust. So we need to start at square one, which is how do we build safety back in first? I just think that is a common misconception. A woman might think, well, I'm expected to just jump fully back in when I'm not ready for that. That's why I think you can do couples work really, really early when it's focused on building safety first.
Yeah. I guess one thing that's coming to my mind right now is I'm wondering if, this kind of couples work or healing together, if there's kind of a spectrum of like multiple stages where obviously there's a stage where both people come together and make a conscious kind of agreement to say, hey, we're going to work on this together. But I imagine from the man's perspective, there are things he can do towards healing the relationship where he doesn't even necessarily need her agreement, but it's just like his own initiative to go and do it, um, without that kind of like, okay, we're going to come and do healing work together. Would you say that's
Yes.
true?
For sure. So that's why I think you're bringing up an important piece, because sometimes a wife just isn't ready, and that's okay. And there's never any pressure from me of like, no, we got to do this way. It's whenever somebody's ready to do it, that's great. But if she's not and she's too hurt and her wall is up and she doesn't want to have any kind of contact or participate in that, doing it informally where he's learning how to build safety and then takes that back to the relationship. He learns what kinds of conversations help her feel seen and then goes and has those with her. And there's a lot of good work that he can do even if she's not willing to do it in the way that you're just describing too. You bring it back to the relationship. His
Mm.
good individual work and learning how to be there for her, channel that back to her.
What are some of the kind of concrete actions, like the actual things that you recommend guys start doing? And let's say if we're sticking with that, maybe if we say step one is kind of your own internal, what we talked about on the last episode. Step two
Mhm.
is maybe initiatives that you're making, ways that you're kind of bringing stuff to the relationship, without necessarily it being a formal thing. And then maybe step three is working together. What are some of those things that a guy can do on his own, regardless of whether or not his partner is ready?
I think one of the best things that he can do, and a lot of what we'll talk about today, it's like sounds very simple, but a lot of times people have fears or concerns about doing it. I think him learning how to sit with her inner pain, validate her pain, acknowledge it, grieve with her, have these kind of repair conversations. Those are so, so important to help her feel like she's not alone.
Mm.
Because so often a husband will try to explain away, "Oh, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to do that," or, I'm trying to do better. He'll talk past her pain, and it just leaves her feeling alone in her experience. So one of the best things that he can do is learn how to meet her. Like, I think about, one of the ways I like to put this is we can't take away her sadness. Rather, we just want to enter the sadness with her by validating and acknowledging her experience, not trying to defend it or explain it, but just empathize with the fact that this is really, really painful for her. And she feels really hurt and many times feels like she's not enough. A husband will often try to help her get out of her pain, which I understand the reason why he cares and she's hurting. If she were to say something like, I just, how could you have done this? It just feels like, I don't mean anything to you. I'm not enough. And he'll jump in and try to counter that. No, that's not true. You're more than enough. I do love you. This doesn't
Mhm.
have anything to do with you. They're on different channels. She's on this emotional, I'm hurting channel. He's trying to explain it on an intellectual channel. And it's a total mismatch.
Mm.
And so him learning how to just acknowledge the fact that that's where she is right now and it hurts. So him empathizing or offering compassion is, I think, how you can get some footing together.
What would I love just like super specific examples of like how you actually say that. So let's say, a husband and wife are sitting down and she's sharing this and saying, I feel like you don't value me and I feel so hurt by this. If you were the husband, like what are the actual words you would say what would be a skillful way to say what you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. I think if I were to hear her say what you just said, if she says, I just don't feel all right, now remind me of the words that you just used, maybe do like a
Could
little role
be
play.
any common thing, like I feel so betrayed, I don't know who you are anymore, I feel lied to, or I feel like I'm not good enough. What any kind of like,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah. So I would say I can totally understand why you feel the way that you do. My actions did betray you. The way that I made these decisions, it did hurt you. So it makes sense why you don't really understand what happened or why and why you might doubt who I am. So I would just mirror that because that's
Mhm.
her experience. So for him to say like, it doesn't happen that often, or yeah, I really do care about you. Rather, you're just going to mirror back with feeling, of course. I can legitimately see why you're so hurt by this.
Mhm.
What I did wasn't okay. And I feel such remorse knowing that you're in pain because of what I've done. So you have every right to question and doubt and feel angry and hurt. I would feel that too. So I just want you to know that I understand this. I understand
Mm,
why you're hurting the way that you are.
it's so beautiful. I mean, it's so obvious when you just say it like that. It's like, yeah, of course, that's the most skillful way to say it. Like you're validating her feelings, you're taking ownership, you're admitting that like, yeah, I did mess up here and I want to do better and I feel remorse and sad that I behaved this way. And you're not deflecting or trying to defend yourself. It's just like acknowledging what she's going through and then taking ownership of what you did.
It's crazy how effective something like that is. I mean, think about it, people who are listening to this can think about their own personal experiences. If you've ever been hurt by somebody and that's not acknowledged, you want to keep explaining it and talking about it and getting through to them so they can finally see what they did wasn't okay. And as soon as they offer this sincere apology and acknowledge it, it's crazy how much our nervous system just it like the tension that we feel diffuses.
Hmm.
I think so many women naturally are going to carry around this anger and this intensity because their pain so often doesn't get seen. The lid gets put on it by explaining or defending or avoiding, which again, I totally understand why a husband would do that because if the conversations don't go well, he's not going to want to have them very much.
Hmm.
Or that just keeps the cycle in motion because then she feels more and more unseen, and then the anger will come out to try to get that pain seen. I know I'm talking about it like it's some easy thing, but when you're in the feeling of it and you see the anger on her face, men freeze. They don't want to make it worse. They just kind of shut down or they go into their shame and they get absorbed by their own pain. So it's tough. There's a lot of landmines in
Yeah.
all this, but like if we were to take away all the emotion and just like, what do I say? How you summarize that was perfect.
Yeah. Validate, take ownership, you know.
Yep.
And, I think just as you said, it's easier said than done. Like it's easy
Yep.
for us to sit here and say, oh, this is how you say it. But
Yeah,
in
yeah.
those moments, it can be really challenging. But one of the things that I've noticed just in myself and my own life is the more you practice it, the easier it gets. The more times you say it and you're like, oh, actually, it wasn't as scary to say it as I thought, and it actually felt really good and felt authentic and in integrity to say that. Because that's the thing I've noticed. If I'm deflecting and, being defensive and it doesn't feel good, I'm like trying to squirm out of something. But if
Yeah.
I take ownership of it and I just say, you're right, I messed up and I'm really sorry and I can understand why you're upset with me. Like it feels so good in a way to admit it.
Yes. Yeah, I agree for both people.
Yeah.
It really does diffuse the situation because that's why there's so much anger from a spouse, from a wife, is there's just so much hurt that she's been alone in, and it just gets channeled in that way.
Let me take kind of a devil's advocate point of view here, or where there might be pushback from, I can imagine some of the people I work with who kind of have a different, maybe something coming up for them where they've maybe taken ownership and they've said, yeah, I did mess up and, this was wrong. And at the same time, it feels like their partner has gone overboard in terms of the accusations. Maybe it's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is the same as if you were cheating on me for all these years with another and sleeping around. And it's maybe feels like their partner doesn't understand. And so where is the line between taking ownership and saying, yeah, I messed up? And then at what point can you say, hey, I want you to understand a bit more of what this addiction is like. It's not about sex, it's a coping mechanism. How do you do that without being defensive, but still wanting to educate your partner about what it is?
Yes, I think the first step is both are necessary. They need to be sequenced in the right order because a lot of times men will try to explain way too early and it just will not land.
Mm,
And a part of the reason why is because when somebody's in their emotion, logic doesn't appeal to them. They can't internalize what you're saying, even if it's true. And so, step one is to down regulate her feelings, or in other words, help to stabilize and create some security in the relationship through what we just what we just talked about, acknowledging, validating. When there's a sense of stability, then it is so helpful for him to offer explanation about what it is about. Because she'll say, this is, you don't love me. If you did, you wouldn't have done this. Or I must not be enough for you because if I was, you wouldn't be looking elsewhere. If he were to immediately, no, that's not true, she can't hear that. So I think starting with the validating, provide some stability, then going into explanation, likely in a different conversation. You might need to do lots of layers of validation. And then once there is that stability, then you can kind of feel that in the relationship when things kind of feel more settled. Then it's so helpful to go into the explanation about what it's about.
So that's a little bit about what maybe the person in recovery can do to make their partner feel safe in this process. Is there anything that the partner can do to make the recovering person feel safe enough to be maybe to be honest and to open up? What should the partner be focusing on?
Yeah. I think this is, again, one of those easier said than done things. But it's so helpful to understand that our surface level behaviors and reactions are stemming from something underneath that. So, for instance, if a wife is angry, or there's accusations, or there's like lashing out and blame, those are coming from hurt. It's like a fight or flight response. When somebody's scared or hurt, we will react in ways that we otherwise wouldn't if we weren't feeling unsafe. And so for many women, it's the fight side of things. Their hurt comes out in the fight to be seen, fighting for safety, fighting for connection. And so what's hard is that the more we interact, both husband and wife, in the fight or flight, because if she gets mad, he'll avoid, and vice versa, right? It's like the one's the fight, the other one's the flight. So the ideal type of conversation is when a wife can share from this vulnerable place what the emotional impact of this situation has been on her. So, for example, let's say they're having a conversation together and a wife, let's say, I don't know, it could be anything. Let's say they're watching a movie and there's a scene on the movie that triggers her and she's reminded of the past. The temptation is for her to say, I can't, like, I can't believe that you did this to us. We're sitting here. We can't even enjoy a movie together because of what you did. I can't stop thinking about the past. You obviously never cared about me. What's wrong with you? If it goes into that, again, I totally understand the why behind that. But when that happens, those conversations, even if he were to say the right words, often won't land because she's in her protection.
Mm,
So the ideal is when the movie scene comes on and it brings up this sense of hurt that she feels because of his actions, for her to express the impact of that right then. As we watch this movie right now and I see this scene, it just brings me back to the past and it brings up all this sadness. I just feel so much hurt right now because there's not trust in our relationship. It brings up this pain of this problem coming between us. And I'm really having a hard time right now. That's so different than the lashing out, but it comes from the same place.
mm,
So the more both husband and wives can communicate on that level, they are able to repair in a way that's just not possible when they're in their protection. So that's one thing that a wife can do. And again, I sometimes a wife when I talk about this, they'll feel like almost this resentment around the idea of doing that. It's like, oh, I have to be nice to him. He
mm,
betrayed me, and I have to be nice to him, and I have to talk to him like softly. And what I like to share is, eh, don't even do this for him.
mm,
Do this for you. Where if you don't share vulnerably, you don't have to. But if you don't, there's no relief there. You could lash out, you could get mad, and you would have every right to do so. But when you're in that protected place, your sadness isn't being seen. your hurt isn't being tended to when he tries to respond with compassion. So it's just not good for you. Don't even think about him. Like, you don't owe him anything. If nothing else, this is for you to start to find some relief, is trying to share on that level so he can meet you there.
Wow, that's really powerful. Like, you know, don't do this for him, do this for yourself. Because, if you want your sadness to be seen, if you want your hurt to be seen, like, this is the way to allow it to be seen.
Yeah, you have to
If you
show
come
it to him.
in, with guns blazing and, slinging arrows, like, it's just going to make the other person put up their walls and get defensive. And it
Yeah.
doesn't benefit either side.
And it's a tall order, of course, for a spouse to do that, especially if she's tried to do that before and he still doesn't respond with compassion. That's where I was just referring to, like, doing in the beginning of when we started speaking. That's such good relationship work for him to learn how to respond with compassion instead of him going into his flight,
Hmm.
defend, avoid, blame. Like, that's really good relationship work. So when she shares, he can meet her there in a way that helps her to feel more seen, more accepted, more loved. That's truly how that betrayal heals, is when that gets acknowledged and seen like that.
Yeah. As we're talking about this, I'm just realizing, I mean, it's so beautiful. It's so obvious that, like, this is the way to approach it. And I'm also recognizing it takes a lot of different skills to be able to do that. I mean, it takes, first of all, some mindfulness of your emotions, to be able to notice, oh, this isn't anger. This is actually hurt at the core of this. This is sadness. And then anger is what's kind of getting proliferated at the outside of this, but it's actually hurt. So it takes mindfulness. It takes letting go of your ego. It takes kind of some ability to, when you're in a triggered or activated state, to kind of down regulate that fight or flight and come back into a more kind of cognizant, rational thinking mode. It takes a lot of skills to do this on both sides.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm glad you brought up mindfulness, because I know that especially that's a core tenet of a lot of what you teach, which is so applicable here too. Not only personally, right, working with husbands, but in relationships as well. If there's no awareness of these underlying feelings that drive it, you can't share them. And if you can't share them, then it's so easy to keep spinning in that cycle. So yeah, I totally agree with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And then it also reminds me of, like, nonviolent communication, instead of saying you did this and you're the reason that's this, it's, oh, this is what I'm feeling. And when this happened, it's bringing up this within me. Um, so communication skills is also just kind of a core part of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces with this, but those are the core parts of what helps people be successful in this.
When it comes to, like, getting kind of nitty gritty here on some actionable steps, because a lot of times, for example, when I'm working with someone, they're relatively early in their recovery and in that relationship. And particularly with something like porn, where it's maybe not like cheating, where it maybe there is this really hard boundary of never again, I'm not going to cheat again. That was a line I'm not going to cross. Porn, because there's so many gray areas, can have a few more relapses. And so when it comes to navigating honesty and accountability in the relationship, what are some of the guidelines? Do you recommend guidelines to people you work with? Do you say you should be fully transparent? You guys should decide it yourselves and come up with a plan? Like, what do you usually do with couples around that?
Most women want more information, not less. I always defer to what a spouse wants, because I think many times they do want to have transparency and disclosure and openness. Some, it's not very often, but some say it's too painful for me to hear it. You just, like, let me know if you're having a hard time. Just let me know what you're doing about it, but I don't want to hear it. I don't need to hear a report of it every time. That's definitely the more rare scenario. So many women have been in the dark for so long, they want to know everything. And so a part of what I encourage people to do is if there are slips or relapses, I do encourage people to share those, because number one, a wife can feel that typically. She can sense when something is off. And number two, there's been so much dishonesty in all of this that in order to rebuild trust, transparency and honesty and being direct and open is a part of how you regain that. So I definitely encourage that to happen. If a wife just says, I don't want to hear it, then that's fine. Then we just work with him to make sure he's getting himself into a good place.
Yeah. I'm definitely in full agree. I mean, honesty, not lying, not deceiving is definitely the foundation of this work. I guess the part that for me feels kind of nuanced or tricky or is especially for some of these guys when they're asked their wife has asked them to say, "Hey, I want you to tell me every time you have a slip or act out." If it's the situation where every time he goes and tells her, she gets into this triggered state and it starts yelling at him and accusing him and saying, "How could you do this?" And it becomes not a safe place for him to be honest. And so I'm just wondering, like, how do you navigate the complexity of that? If obviously best case scenario would be if she's able to be a safe place for that kind of honesty and say, "Hey, thank you for letting me know. I see you're working on this. I appreciate the honesty." Worst case scenario is every time he tells her about a trigger or an urge or a slip, she, lashes out and shames him and, makes it worse. So I'm just curious, like, what's the right balance there for you?
So if I were to be working with that couple and that was the case, I would want to work with her to explore the emotion because this goes back to that whole thing we were just talking about. It's the fight response, but really underneath it, it hurts. So I would want to work with her to better understand when he shares with you that he's struggling or has a slip, what does that bring up inside for you? And I want to get past the anger into the sadness, into the hurt, and then have her share that with him while we're in session together to build some muscle memory around that type of conversation. Because so often she'll just get totally flooded. But if we can build in some reps and help her to know how to share, how to tap into the like you talked about the mindfulness, for her to become more and more aware of the pain underneath that, that conversation will go so different as opposed to when the protection just fires out, which again, I totally understand it. It just eh, couples will just keep missing each other if that's the case. He won't want to share, which again is not an excuse, but he'll be less likely to share, which then she'll feel even more like she's in the dark. So I would want to try to target that and create a new type of response. That would be my first ideal step.
Yeah, I love that idea of a muscle memory, like just putting in the reps of, you know, an appropriate, skillful response. You know,
Yes,
the muscle memory of what does it feel like when you get triggered or activated by their actions? Can you get some muscle memory of, oh, I'm responding in an kind of in a way that's a bit more grounded and
yeah,
understanding and communicative rather than fight or flight?
that's the one. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly because I mean, if she wants honesty, yes, we need to have like a place where both people can feel safe as they share. And if he shares and it's a surefire like knockdown fight, it just doesn't work for either one of those people, for either one, either person. So we would want to, yeah, build in as much, security, safety as we can, so both can share openly.
In terms of like a repair conversation, let's say there is a fight, whether it's about a relapse or just kind of anything. There's some fight, disagreement, some moving apart. What does an effective repair conversation look like?
Yeah, I think the elements that would just to summarize a bit about what we talked about earlier, because the more a husband can acknowledge and validate and express compassion, those are like the three. Well, if I were to break it down into four pieces: acknowledging the effect, the impact, the situation, validating the pain, being able to apologize, take ownership, and then fourth, what's he going to do differently? So if there was a setback or a slip, for him to acknowledge the pain and validate and own that, and then say, here's what I learned about why I did this. I was coping with this sense of inadequacy and it got overwhelming for me. I felt just so stressed and overwhelmed. And I coped in this way. Moving forward, here's how I'm going to handle this differently. I'm going to be doing my shame work to try to break these beliefs. I'm going to talk to you sooner about what I feel instead of keeping it bottled up. And I'm going to be reaching out to the people in my community to make sure that they're supporting me. I'm not doing this alone. So I think those few elements help her to feel like her pain is being seen and there can be something different moving forward.
I'm smiling right now because as you're describing these steps, it's such a sign of maturity if somebody's able to do that. And it's making me think of this thing that, going through addiction and then being in the process of recovery is, in my opinion, it's the greatest resource for personal development. That like people who have gone through addiction, it is such a powerful, I mean, it's a little bit of a sink or swim, like it might cause you to sink and that's very unfortunate. But if you can learn how to swim, it gives you some of the most valuable, interpersonal tools, that are just going to serve you for all aspects of life, like communicating, taking ownership, practicing, emotional intelligence. So many of these things that just benefit you.
It's true. It's funny you should say that. I was having a conversation with somebody like 3 days ago, and just hearing him speak, he didn't know what I did for work, but just hearing him speak, I'm like, this guy sounds like he's done like I wonder if he'd struggle with addiction. He's done really good. He's done such good work personally. And then like 4 minutes later, he told me he's like, I used to be struggling with drugs and alcohol, and my life is totally different now. I'm like, yeah, I knew, I could tell because of how he was speaking, the skills he was not saying directly, but I'm just listening and kind of hearing what he was saying. So I agree. I think there's so much growth that happens when people confront this. And it almost forces people to do it, especially if they're in a relationship. If somebody's single, it can drag on for a long, long time because there's not this, you're almost sometimes not forced to deal
Hmm.
with it. Whereas if you're married and your wife says, I'm not going to stay unless this gets addressed, I'm not doing this anymore. He has to choose. And most men don't want to end their relationship. So they're almost like made to confront it. And I'm a big proponent of whatever gets somebody started, it doesn't matter. Whether it's like the fear of divorce, the fear of job loss, it could be some external thing. Whatever gets them into motion is great because when they're in motion, that motivation changes. It might not just be for her anymore. It then transitions to like, I've seen the benefit of this. I want this for me. So yeah, yeah, you can tell when somebody's done their work just by how they carry themselves and how they
Yeah.
think and interact with people.
There's this quote that I saw originally on Instagram, and I don't remember it exactly word for word, but the basic quote was something like this. It says, "Every time I see a strong person, I ask, what dark did you overcome? Because mountains do not rise without earthquakes."
That's great. That's a really powerful quote.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, unless you're, there's so many parallels to that, right? The steel that's, hardened steel, you're like hammering away at this thing to create this sharp sword, like mountains growing. And it's, unless you're directly addressing this and making changes, it doesn't happen on its own.
Yeah. And there's also another kind of idea, I forget who said this, but the quality of your life can be determined by the number of difficult conversations you're willing to have, something like that. And
Yeah.
so I think, this leads into my next question, which is, if we look at these earthquakes being, what give rise to mountains, or the difficult conversations, the difficulties, the challenges being what give rise to equality in a relationship, I'm guess what I'm curious to know is because a lot of people, I think, assume that, oh, if there's betrayal, if there's addiction, that it's just going to harm a relationship. But what I've seen is that a lot of times, if couples can navigate it, it actually allows them to strengthen and build a relationship that's even stronger than it was before. And I'm curious if that's what you witness as well.
Yeah. Just when you said that, I just thought about a couple that I worked with. This was more of an extreme case, but for 17 years, he was seeing prostitutes and she had no idea. All she knew is that her husband was emotionally detached, not ever present, Just she's doing life on her own, he's doing his life, weren't connected together. And then all of it comes out. And she's like, of course, like this is why. And he had this like miraculous change, and they're religious people. So he's like, God changed my heart and who I am. And I focused on the relationship side of them, of the healing with them, because she just felt, of course, just buried by this betrayal. So because he had made such good personal changes and then learned how to be there for her, there it's like I would chuckle sometimes after the end of our sessions. She would say, "I feel like I'm getting punked right now because this isn't my husband. Like, I don't know who this person is. Like, he is so attentive. He's so compassionate and present, and, like, we have conversations that we never had before." Like, I'm waiting for, Ashton Kutcher to jump out and say, like, "Oh, this is all, this is none of this is real." She just couldn't believe how close they felt, especially after how low their relationship became.
Mm,
So there's lots of examples, I'm sure that maybe you've seen too, that people come through some unbelievably hard things, and their marriage is better than their marriage is better than at any point previous to it coming out,
mm,
because you have to go through and learn those skills, and it can't go back to the way that it was after discovery. There's no going back. It's creating something different, but this something different can be so much better than what it was.
mm. Yeah. I mean, it goes back to that quote, mountains do not rise without earthquakes. Like if you want that kind of relationship, sometimes you have to have those challenges. And it's the
Yes.
overcoming of the challenge, the learning how to, really understand your partner, learning how to practice empathy, learning how to communicate, and, you know, all of those are what make the relationship even stronger.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. If a couple's listening right now and they feel like their relationship is just too far gone, they don't even know where to begin, they kind of feel lost and just disconnected, what would you say to that couple?
I would say, as soon as you said that, sometimes I get texts from like previous clients. I got a text from somebody like 3 hours ago, actually, who, when he came to me, his wife kicked him out of the house and was like, I'm just trying to decide what my next move is, but separation like immediately and pending possible divorce. He worked so hard to get himself into a good spot. And I won't read the whole thing, but he just says, looking back, I wanted you to know that my wife started wearing her wedding ring again, and this weekend she made room for me to come back in upstairs. I'm so inspired and motivated more than ever to continue. I want to be the best person I possibly can be. So
Mm,
when we were working together, I'm like, just based on the conversations he would tell me that they were having, I was like, it sounds like the crack is open. There's a crack that's a possibility that if you just be consistent, demonstrate change, that this can possibly turn around.
mm,
And so for the couple who is in that spot, if a husband is willing to do the work, my encouragement for a wife is maybe to just adopt a stance of we'll see, where you don't have to believe that it'll get better. You don't have to believe that he's going to do the work. If you think your relationship is too far gone, but there's even a small part of you that wishes it could be different, a husband has such enormous influence to make change personally and to create safety in a relationship that can invite her back in. So it's okay if people feel just like, I don't know if this is possible. If there's a willingness, there absolutely is so many good tools for couples to repair and rebuild trust. I think it helps to hear that couples come back from some awful things when they have a desire for it to be different and then just get direction on how to make it so.
mm. So beautiful. I mean, yeah, it echoes my feelings as well. I've seen so many examples of couples that seemed so far gone. The betrayal was so deep, but then they were able to really, through the work of, particularly the work of the betrayer or the husband,
Yep.
through his taking ownership, doing the work, understanding the addiction, overcoming it, they were able to get to a place where the relationship is thriving more than it was before. So I really want to echo that for anyone listening, like there is hope and it can get better. So yeah, hopefully that message gets out there.
Yeah, it's important. I think people lose hope because it goes on for so long. I just think, yeah, just getting this is why again I think doing the relationship work as soon as possible can help build some hope because if they start having good conversations and he starts to learn how to build safety for her and she doesn't feel ignored and alone all the time. So many women don't want to break up they don't want to end the relationship,
Mm,
but they can't stay if she's just continually her pain is looked over. So him learning those skills as quickly as he can, I think builds and breathes hope into the relationship that it's possible.
yeah. Fantastic, man. Well, I'm so glad we brought you on for a second time. This was, even juicier than the first one, in a totally different flavor. I guess last thing, where can people find out about more about your work and get in touch with you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me on. It's a pleasure to have the chance to speak and work alongside you. Just the work that you're doing and helping making sure that people have the tools that they need. It's yeah, there's a huge need for this. So if anybody's interested in other resources, my podcast is where I just give away there's no secrets on the podcast. I truly give away just all the tools are there. And it's called Couples Healing from Pornography Addiction. So for those who are interested, then they're welcome to check out the podcast.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Sam. And that's it for today, folks. We'll see you guys on the next episode of Unhooked.